If you're an HR professional who works hard to fill roles within your company, keep employees engaged, and build company culture, welcome to America Back to Work, where dreams only work if we do. We'll share wide-ranging issues surrounding pre-employment background screening, HR topics such as recruiting, hiring, labor trends, and company culture, as well as broader HR-influenced business topics such as customer experience, service level excellence, and protecting what matters through best practices in prevention, protection, and corporate security. America Back to Work is brought to you by S2 Verify. Here's your host, Arnette Heintze.
Welcome to America Back to Work, brought to you by S2 Verify, where our purpose is to help you hire with confidence and manage insider risk. I'm your host, Arnette Heintze. Thank you for joining. Today, our guest is Adam Gellert. Adam is the founder and CEO of HiredHippo, a marketplace for hiring that connects top employers and candidates. Adam is a serial entrepreneur on a mission to reshape recruitment and change the candidate experience. In addition to HiredHippo, Adam has founded the Linkus Group and is a co-founder of the Help List and Disrupt HR. Adam, you got a lot going on in the HR world, and thank you so much for joining. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about HiredHippo and what led you to start that?
Arnette, thank you very much for having me. I appreciate being here. You cover very important topics, and I'm so obsessed with the recruiting and hiring space that I could talk about this all day. I started HiredHippo out of a personal need. I'd be running my own boutique, sort of like modern agency, where we support mainly companies that could go from 1 to 250 people, sort of in that like 20 to 50 person sweet spot, whether it's technology or executive or revenue hiring. And what we realized is that like a lot of our customers, at a certain point, they hired someone internally, an in-house recruiter, right, to take them through more mass hiring. And what we found was that, a lot of them kind of complained to me about not having a product that they could find the quality candidates that we found for them at the beginning during those early stages. And so we had been using all those tools ourselves, LinkedIn, Indeed, all the, culprits that you know of and you hear of on a day-to-day basis. And what we realized that it was a very messy space for startups and SMBs. Everyone was, recruiting and hiring and posting in the same spot, making it very difficult to stand out and figure out if you're attracting the quality passive talent that you want, without having to reach out to people and sort of do that direct headhunting and recruiting. So what HiredHippo essentially is we've created this way for high potential, passive, more exclusive talent to let us know what they're looking for in order to make a career move before anyone else, and then companies can post them in this more modern approach of less candidates. And so we've created this marketplace that works very efficiently that way.
Yeah. So I know you're servicing both employers and job seekers. And, I think depending on what perspective you're coming from, they might have different expectations. Can you talk about some of the differences in expectations from each category?
Yeah, it's a good question. I talk about that a lot because, in hiring, you have, two very ends of the spectrum, right? Like, candidates essentially want it very easy for them to, be able to find a role and, have it be the right fit the first time. And companies want it to be a little bit more, harder and, sort of like test some assumptions to make sure they're making the right hire. Overall, I mean, everyone really wants to, be fulfilled at the end of the day. They want to, join a company that they're pretty happy with and they can, develop their career, have great career trajectory. And companies want people that are going to, be a great fit, add to the culture, help their business move forward. And so the push and pull from what is expected from both candidates and companies is very hard, especially in a marketplace. And so, at kind of like the beginning of where we were kind of figuring out HiredHippo and, how we could attract higher potential, better talent, we were like, okay, well, resumes are something that typically candidates that don't actively look for a job, or maybe they've been in a role for 5 to 10 years and they haven't done a resume in a while. Let's get rid of those, right? But then on the company side, we found that companies were like, well, this is what I need and this is what I'm used to in terms of making a decision. So we had to go through several product iterations, a lot of customer discovery to figure out, what would be the right fuel to sort of engage a really, really strong match. And we basically brought it down to the basics, which is what's next in my career. So we really figured out, okay, candidates are going to have to put in some work, but we want them to put it in once. And we want to give them, the benefit of hearing back from employers. We want to give them the benefit of, we're going to help them through the process, making sure they make the right decisions, and all those things. But we want to figure out first, what is the right work environment? What's the right job that I want to be doing? And what's the right compensation for me to, leave my current job and go work somewhere else, or apply to a certain role, or, take notice. And on the company side, they wanted just as much information from the candidate. Had they met with someone already? What is this person's references like? Can they share their value in an interview? Are they going to be a top performer, and why? Do they, are they interested in the startup for the right reasons? All these kind of things, create this alignment and match, which is so important, that technology, really struggles with figuring out. And we've kind of, what we feel come up with a really great recipe for success.
That's great. So, I heard you on another podcast that you made a comment around today's job seekers really don't like job descriptions, that they shy away from that. And I find that really interesting because, and it might be a generational thing. I mean, like my generation, which is a boomer generation, I think we kind of live and breathe for a job description. But what you're finding today might be a little different. Tell us a little bit about that. And I think you've taken a differentiated approach in this area.
Yeah, absolutely. The interesting thing is that a lot of people who leave jobs early on, within the first 3 months, 6 months, a year, they basically talk about how the job wasn't the way that it was explained at the beginning, right? So they were kind of like sold on the wrong home, right? And, I think that's a lot of how job descriptions are typically thought of, like more of like an advertisement rather than being a really good way to push, attract and repel the right people. Being more truthful, open, honest, transparent, about, the good, the bad, the ugly, right? Which is one thing that sort of like, other products out there have showcased, when you're, purchasing something online, you get to hear what other people think and stuff like that, right? And so with the job description, especially if you're, currently unemployed and you're really, in a position where you have to, apply to every role, it just becomes very, transactional. So one of the things with job descriptions is they're not standardized. Everyone's going to write a different thing. They continually get iterated. There's not a lot of transparency on them in terms of like who the team is, what's good about the role. Would somebody that's worked in a startup or corporate environment be good in this particular position? Salary transparency. There's all these things, right? So what we've looked at is like, without creating sort of like a video or a movie about the company and the job, like what is the next best thing that we could do, that's going to be a really great way for candidates to see, behind the curtain what it's going to be like at this company, so that when I start having those conversations, I can ask better questions in the interview. I can have better conversations. I can kind of dig a bit more. And so our job descriptions basically take in like 10 years of our experience researching what candidates want to know before applying to a job. So it's all the things that you kind of like think about or ask in an interview. And then the other key thing with our product is that we only show jobs to candidates that have an interest and a desire and the experience for those particular jobs. So it's a very curated LinkedIn, right? So these jobs aren't posted, where everyone everywhere can apply. It's very specific to those candidates. So I believe there's still work that needs to be done, but job descriptions, for better or for worse, are have a lot of work to do in terms of not being boring and words on a paper, right? So
I've experienced that firsthand. As a matter of fact, in a previous company I had built, I had challenged our team to come up with a different approach on job descriptions and to make it more inspiring. And that's quite because I think most employers do take a very standardized approach and just bearing very tactical. This is the job, and I actually saw that a handful about 10 years ago. I noticed that we needed to shift away from that. And now another area that I think kind of is the flip side of this coin is that resumes. You're not that high on resumes either. And so tell us your thoughts about that. And what do you see? How do you see employers adapting to this idea of resumes in the future?
Yeah, great question. And I feel like it is a bit of the same reasons with the job descriptions, right? So they're not standardized, they're boring. A lot of people argue about, the timeline of a resume, what should be shown, do you put your picture on there? Do you not, right? There's just like a limit in terms of, the standard that everybody agrees by. And so the other kind of side to that is that most people have kind of admitted that they spend, between 6 and 11 seconds looking at resumes. Some people say they do more. That's fine, right? But really, people invest a lot of time in putting together something on paper that's supposed to tell a story. If you want to talk about a story, you go and you meet with someone, you have a conversation, you have the interview, you get on a podcast, you kind of learn, the story, and it's not just a piece of paper. So I feel like, they're very limiting. The other thing wasn't just about like thought and feeling. It was more about when we looked at the candidates that were the most successful and actually ended up staying with our clients for 10 years when we're doing sort of the agency work, were particularly candidates that employers would say, I didn't like this about the resume, and we push back. And I know that there are going to be a lot of recruiters out here that will resonate with that, where, the hiring manager would essentially say, this isn't, a good fit, or this isn't a candidate that, I think would be good, but given the opportunity to interview and then start at the company, they actually become, a very good candidate, very good employee. So we could see that there was a bit of misalignment between what, you put on paper and versus like who you actually are. And so what we do in the same way is kind of showcase, who the person is beyond the resume, how they answer certain questions, some ideas kind of taken from a dating app, for example, which is, as a salesperson, what were my accomplishments? How can I explain those accomplishments? Why am I in sales? Very conversational, which our customers really love because they get a little bit more insight into who the candidate is and be able to not only have better conversations with them in an interview, but actually be able to make better decisions and not say no to people too early. I think you mentioned it too, that, job descriptions on that side, they are, something that, you need to work at to make kind of beautiful. I think people do a really good job at it on their career page, but that's not how candidates typically find the job description. It falls flat on, the platforms that exist today. And that's the problem. And if people were able to showcase, the way that, the job description is shown on your website with the images and videos, it's just going to make a lot more impact in how you, accept or decline that role.
Yeah. Yeah. I know your passion for this field really stands out because I've seen, many of your HR leadership contents that you're publishing on LinkedIn, and Matter of fact, anybody from our audience should check you out there because you've got a ton of really good insight. One of the things that you shared not too long ago included your thoughts on whether you have to be a people person to excel in HR. Could you share your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I mean, it's that's a question that comes up a lot. You know, uh, from people asking me, hey, I'm considering recruiting or HR as an industry that I want to get into, and it's because I love people, right? So that is like basically table stakes. I mean, that's got to be something that for industries that are people facing, that's something that you do inherently have to care about. But that's not what recruiting is about. Um, this isn't necessarily a network game, or I've got more connections than this person. You have to really know how to match people, and beyond that, you need to know the business problem that you're solving for companies, right? So jobs are really just business problems that companies need to solve. They could change, and you need to look beyond sort of like the job description and look beyond the candidate and make sure that everyone's making a really good decision, because especially nowadays when people stay about 18 months in a role on average, it's not going to be the same as what it was many years ago. Um, you know it needs to be a really good fit, and for a candidate or someone that's either graduating or transitioning into another career or continuing to develop their career right now, they need to be in a position where the career trajectory is going to make sense. And if you really become exceptional at something, know what your value is, know what problems you can solve at a company, it's very hard to be out of a job in those cases. And so it's so important for recruiters to make sure that people are making the right decision that's going to elevate their career and continue to move them forward. But it's also a business thing, right? So from a company perspective, labor is usually the largest cost of any business. And so, making these decisions of, hiring is a big deal for companies. And so, they really need to understand candidates and their career trajectory and what's going to work.
Yeah. I know your experience, you're working with a lot of founders of companies. You're working with, organizations that oftentimes have less than 250 people. So there's a lot of lessons that, the entrepreneur can learn along the way as they start hiring people. What are some of those lessons that you've discovered that, maybe some founders are discovering as they start this process?
From a hiring perspective, or just a general business perspective?
Hiring perspective, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've hired thousands of people, at the earliest stages of companies, when they're bootstrapped, they're sitting on their kitchen countertop and just trying to figure out, who is the next best person for the role. And, again, it comes down to the business problem that the company is currently looking to solve, right? What are the gaps that the founder has that's maybe holding the company back from moving forward? As a founder, typically when 99% of companies fail, it's the founder that's the bottleneck, right? It's the founder that makes those decisions,
Yeah.
in a business moving forward. And, most founders kind of get into this position of like, they've never run a business before. They've never hired people before. So, just understanding those different dynamics of who to hire and who can help me and who is going to move the ball forward. I always tell founders to look at basically three things, which is trust, attitude, and passion. Those are kind of like the cornerstones of any role. And then role specific, there could be other things like, curiosity, grit.
Mhm.
There's just a lot of things that beyond, what you're seeing on paper, you kind of need to figure out about who is going to move your company forward based on, either their previous experience, lack of experience that they have, and just who they are. And so that's a, key thing for founders to keep in mind.
I think one element that I've learned that HiredHippo does to help mitigate risk that entrepreneurs might have when they're hiring individuals. Tell us a little bit how you approach that, how you're helping, the employer mitigate that risk of new hires.
Yeah. So I typically tell founders, look, hiring is risky. You're never going to get 100% right. We're dealing with humans. People are people, right? So you can't get past that. But what you really need to know is that, alignment is a very big key piece in the hiring process. You might not be able to, have a crystal ball and identify, where the candidate's going to want to go in 5 years from now, or what sort of family or things come up along the way, right? But if you understand the role in general, who would be really good fit for that role, right? I'll give you an example. I mean, we hire for a lot of startups, and one of the things is that there are a lot of people that want to work for startups because they're interesting, they're exciting, and they could have a lot of excitement. But the problem is there's a lot of people that aren't great at working at startups because it requires a individual determination. It requires a really good attitude when things go sideways. How do you come back from stress like that? And so, it's really hard for founders to identify, when someone comes in for an interview and they're so excited, they're so interested, they come in well prepared, because they're coming maybe from a corporate environment and they understand how to prepare and sell themselves. But when they come in, we hear from a lot of our customers that, they didn't do well. That's why we get kind of called in. So, I would definitely look at getting someone who's a trusted partner, who's going to dig super, super deep in terms of what's required, and then dig very deep into the candidate, understand all aspects of matching and human condition and, motivation and excitement and, all those things that are required. And that's how you kind of minimize risk, by looking at alignment. Another huge thing that comes up a lot is if they're not a heck yes, they're a no, right? And so, what I see a lot of companies doing is saying, hey, we could be making a mistake here. We might be letting someone great go. But at the end of the day, if we're not all feeling comfortable that this is the right person to take us to the next level, then we've kind of got to make a decision, right? And there could be, other factors. Maybe there's only 2 candidates in, all of the US that could do this particular job, right? So you have to also understand the market. You have to understand the pay structure. There's a lot of things to kind of, pack into hiring. So you really need a good partner to help you with that. It's something I could go on for a while, but I'll kind of leave it at that.
Yeah, that's so true. Well, Adam, thank you so much for joining us today. And, it's about time for us to sign off. But before we do, I'd like to ask you a question that I ask every guest, which is, if S2 Verify were to conduct a background investigation on you today, would there be any surprises?
I mean, there's always surprises, but I don't see any whatsoever. Our one KPI as a business is repeat business, and so you could ask all of our clients how we treat them, how we care more than anyone else. Those are our values. I would say the one thing that maybe people don't know about me is that I cut my own hair. That I find it's just more efficient to be able to cut my hair whenever I want, how I want to do it. So it's something that I learned and self-taught. But that would be the one thing that you'd find if you dug into my background.
So true. Adam, thank you so much for your time today and sharing your insights. Where can our listeners follow up with you and keep in touch with what's going on at HiredHippo?
Yeah, absolutely. I've launched a personal website, recruiteradam.com. So you can find all my links there. Also LinkedIn, is obviously the place where I spend most of my time. And where all my immediate thoughts come out. So I welcome the opportunity. I mean, I'm always looking to learn from other people as well. And I find that having these conversations and connecting with people that are interested in creating the future of work and a better place for everyone to kind of feel fulfilled in their roles. I'd welcome those conversations very much.
Well, thanks so much, Adam. So And now I'd like to have just a minute with my partners, Bill and Jim at S2 Verify. We were talking earlier, Bill, and I know you had some thoughts about reportability. Can you provide some insight into that?
If you're talking about reportability from the standpoint of the states, so under FCRA, basically the criminal convictions are reportable forever. Under certain states, it's only reportable up to 7 years. California is a big one, and so if you have a criminal conviction beyond 7 years in California, you can't report it. There's also, regulations around arrest records. So not only is there an FCRA governing body for criminal convictions and criminal records, there's individual states that only allow you to report records within a 7-year window.
I think that's hugely important for our clients and anybody that's looking at background screening. There's many employers that sometimes think they just get everything from an individual's background from the time they were born to the time they are working, but in reality that is that time frame, 7 years, is probably more the standard. I know there are some states that we can go 10 years, but it's not forever. And when it comes to light, sometimes somebody finds out, oh, well, so-and-so had a conviction for theft that maybe went back 20 years. They start asking, why didn't we have that information? Well, in fact, CRAs are not permitted providing that information, nor are they allowed to use that information in their hiring decisions.
Yeah, I mean, we have a very specific client that oftentimes, the local location's calling us saying you missed a record. Well, no, we found the record. We just adjudicated it out of the reporting of that record so that the person didn't, you can't see it. So we didn't miss a record, but like you say, according to the client and or the state, we can't report that record. So,
yeah. Hey, Jim, and Bill just referenced this adjudication, and I know that's a process, and we have a number of team members that are dedicated to full-time adjudication that work with you in this area. Why don't you provide our clients and audience a little bit of insight around this process?
Glad to do so. This is something that Bill and I took on day one. Many CRAs in this industry kind of do what's deemed to be automated or robotic or electronic adjudication. It's a very complex topic, particularly to try to talk about in a short window here. But having said that, what our clients would need to know from S2 Verify is every record that's going to be sent through to a client has eyes on by a human. Electronically, no records found, or clear records, yes, the robot cuts them loose. But if there's a record to be reviewed, a human lays eyes on that, specifically because the very things that Billy just touched on. What are the client's criteria? What state does the applicant reside in? Key point. California is a 7-year state, but if the applicant's living in Texas and has a record that's 9 years old in California, the California law doesn't apply to it. It applies to the residence or where that candidate actually lives. Point to your question, Arnette, our folks look at those records. They look at client criteria. They look at where the record came from. They look at the details of the record to fundamentally ascertain, can I send this? Does it meet requirements of the state and the client, or do I need to pull it? Is it a conviction? Is it an arrest record? Is it a deferred adjudication? Is he still in the window, he or she? All of those variables go into that. And we've got a large group of people that this is what they do every day. Primarily law enforcement background, criminal justice background, clerk of court backgrounds where they're familiar with records, court process, how records are prosecuted, what language in certain counties, states means. But for us to verify and for our clients, it's a huge win because we don't send these things out without looking at them. Last but not least, it requires, if you will, people to ultimately ascertain whether or not the source of the record is even clear enough to send. So our folks engage with courts and states. They'll get a record back, be it from a robot or from a court runner. They'll look at it and go, well, that makes no sense, right? So others in our industry send it. Ours gets stopped, researched, clarified, then it's either pushed forward or called back. But it's a very, very, probably one of the most critical resource groups we have at S2 Verify.
For our audience, please tune in next week when we continue our exploration of topics critical to success in HR. We'll see you then. And it goes without saying, let's get America and, in fact, Canada back to work because dreams only work if we do. Adam, thank you so much for calling today.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
If you want to stay abreast of HR, recruiting, and hiring trends, tips, and tools, make sure you subscribe to America Back to Work. If you enjoyed this episode, leave us a rating and a review.